everyone, and welcome to this webinar from CFA Institute on Python and data science for investment professionals. Thanks so much for joining us today. So I'm Richard Fernand from CFA Institute, and I'm going to just briefly outline what we're going to be covering on the webinar today. So what we'd like to do is explain to you about just the huge change that is sweeping the investment industry, how data science is revolutionizing roles throughout the industry, and give you some understanding as to how it potentially can be utilized by you, perhaps in a role that you're in right now, or maybe a role that you aspire to. And also give you some tips and pointers as to how you can acquire this valuable skill and really become sufficiently expert. You feel comfortable in this world where data science and coding terminology is just becoming ubiquitous. So in a couple of minutes or so, I'm going to introduce a colleague, Sri Krishnamurthy, who is an expert in data science, and he's also the lead instructor on a data science program, Python for investment professionals, that CFA Institute has been rolling out very successfully to learners worldwide. What I'll also be doing is we'll be talking you through the specific course and some of the course features that you may wish to consider when thinking about your own data science journey. But before I do that, I'd actually really like you to just join me in a simple conversation I'm going to have with a gentleman called Gaurav Singh. Now, Gaurav is a current market practitioner and a former student of data science through the CFA Institute Data Science Instructor-Led Training Program. So, Gaurav, if you're available, could you please turn on your camera and unmute? I've got a couple of questions for you.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Hey, Gaurav. Thanks for joining us today. Nice to see you. So, perhaps we can, do you know what? It might be helpful too. Sri, if you could also turn your camera and unmute, join the conversation.
Hello, everyone.
So I'll introduce Sri formally in a minute or two, and you'll see just how fantastically expert he is in data science. Before we get there, a few questions for Gaurav. So Gaurav, perhaps you can start just by telling us a bit about your current job role. So what are you doing at the moment?
Sure. Yeah. So I work in product development here at Columbia Threadneedle Investments in London. So essentially, I guess you could describe my role as someone who just launches a bunch of funds across a variety of different asset classes. So this could be, you know, in the equity space, in the LDI space. I mean, as part of that, I have to do a lot of data analysis to take a look at what are competitors doing, what are, you know, active funds doing, passive funds doing. So for me, data is quite, I mean, I'm using data, large amounts of it, and large data sets on more, I guess, more so a daily basis to take a look at the market, what's going on, what are the competitors doing, and where can we find a gap in terms of launching a new fund or a fund that matches our capabilities, essentially. So a bunch of analysis there, a bunch of data visualization needed here. And that's where I think a course like this and just working, well, just some background. So I did do this course, I think a few months ago. And a course like this just helping me to navigate large data sets using Python. For my role, I think it's come in very handy.
So that's really helpful. So why Python? What made you think I need to develop my skills in Python particularly?
Yeah, so I mean, you sort of touched upon it a little bit earlier, just on how data science is sort of making its way into the investment profession. So in terms of my background, I don't have a data science background. So I'm an economics major. And it's funny because I guess a lot of the younger generation now are learning Python in, you know, grade 6 or something, you know, middle school, which wasn't the case in my time. I'm fairly young, but in my time. So that's the thing. So occasionally things like words like machine learning, you know, neural networks, AI, were just buzzwords. And for me, I think the course that Sri delivered, I think helped demystify that for me. So it was no longer just a buzzword you hear and, oh, someone's doing something in computer science or something. It actually became something where I could see how it looks like in practice in the investment field. And for me, that was quite important. And I think it's important in pretty much anything. If you want to learn something new, especially if you're a visual learner, it helps to see what's under the hood, essentially, behind some of these things.
So what have you been able to apply or try out in your job since taking this course?
Yep. So right now, it's been a lot of data visualization techniques, which we do learn on the course. I do produce quite a few, competitor analysis reports and a bunch of reports like that, where we have a bunch of, charts, graphs, and I think that's where, obviously, Excel is great, but I think Python takes it to the next level, and really gets that fidelity of, analysis, essentially. So the different higher level analysis that Python enables via their different, the different packages that we can download. So for me, that's the most useful thing at the moment, but I'm sure as I keep on going, there'll be more and more things that I can use. I do quite a bit of work in Morningstar as well. So there's a lot of data which I can import. And then from there, I think the possibilities are endless if you have some of these kind of skills in data science.
Fantastic. So Sri, I'm just curious, anything you'd like to ask your former pupil?
Oh, it's always a pleasure to see that many students who come to the class have a lot of interest in trying to understand the field. But it's fascinating to see when students actually learn from the course and apply it into their jobs, right? So it's not just about the learning aspect of it, but the ability to apply. I mean, there are tons and tons of materials on the internet on Python and other additional things. I mean, you can pick up a book for free, or you can pay $9.99 and get a book. But it's about how do you kind of, position what you already know as an investment professional. You already have a lot of context. You have your stakeholders, you have specific goals in mind, but the ability to connect the dots is what I think many students actually came with the hope of learning. And it's kind of, listening to Gaurav, I'm kind of thinking, oh, this is awesome. I've not thought about bringing in examples on Morningstar. So he's already, looked at the possibilities and already thought about connecting to Morningstar and bringing in and also looking at the growth possibilities, right? It's not like a box where you could say, okay, I've learned this amount. Now, where do I go from here? You basically need to kind of think of it as I've seeded the journey, and how do I expand the journey, and how do I build upon what I've learned? And I think that's where many people who are affiliated with the CFA Institute and the CFA program already have that mindset of continuous learning, already have that commitment towards learning. So it's kind of nice to see the interest and the expansion of the pie, if you will, to not only understand the concepts, but being able to apply those in a practical setting. So thank you, Gaurav, for sharing all your thoughts.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gaurav. Appreciate it. And yeah, we hope to see you again sometime.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, well, thanks very much for that. It was very helpful. Initial kind of scene setting. I just want to say a couple of housekeeping things before we kind of launch into the webinar. So we're going to run to the hour, so a total of 60 minutes. You'll be muted, but you can ask questions. So down the bottom, you should find the Q&A button. So please do use that Q&A box to ask questions, and I'll be monitoring that, and we'll bring them up either during the session or aggregate the questions, because there'll be time at the end to ask additional questions. If you have technical issues, then the chat box is also very useful down there. And we'll be recording this session, recording it right now, actually. So at the end of this session, we will send out to all of you the recording and also the slides. So all of this is available, and we may not go through every slide, by the way, today. So there's some additional information you can go home and read on your own that will help your understanding of what we're trying to do here. So here's the agenda for today, focusing on the data revolution in finance, thinking specifically about, what does it mean for us what's changing in job roles, and what do we need to do to kind of just to keep up with that. Then we'll focus on our specific program. So what is it we're offering here? This instructor-led training program that Sri Krishnamurthy leads on behalf of Quad University. And then Sri will talk through a case study, which just brings to life some of the power that data science techniques can have, and how they really are revolutionizing the way in which we're able to analyze data sets. So at this point, I really should introduce Sri. So many of you, I think, if you've been following quant finance, you'll actually know about him already. He's a big name in the quant finance world, regular columnist for Wilmot Magazine, which is kind of one of the preeminent quant finance publications. And I think key thing about Sri is that he's not just really expert in these things, but he's also a really brilliant explainer. So there's many people out there who are fantastic at quant finance, but they struggle to explain this, particularly to a non-expert audience. And Sri has a huge amount of experience in explaining at multiple levels, both to experts and teaching at a kind of a very high practitioner level, but also to new entrants. And it's really important, I think, that anyone looking to undertake this thinks about the accessibility of understanding, and Sri's a great person to make all of this stuff highly accessible. As you will see, published author and a professor at Northeastern University, teaching at many other universities, and a real, lifelong contributor actually to CFA Institutes, and is a CFA charter holder himself. So we're really pleased to be able to work with Sri, and with that, I'll turn it over to him, and I'll interrupt you as appropriate, Sri, when the questions arise.
Thank you for the kind words, Richard. And it's always a pleasure to work with the CFA Institute. It's always something, when I started my CFA journey, gosh, this was like 15 plus years ago. It was a program which I thought would just connect the dots for me to what I thought I knew in the financial services world. I was a budding analyst at Citigroup, and I was trying to connect all the dots on what does the bonds mean, and equities and trading and all the good stuff. I was working with a lot of data, and at that point, Bloomberg was the data source of choice. We were getting in a lot of data. We were connecting all the pipelines, if you will, validating it against many of the notes and the Excel and various tools we had. And it was always fascinating to see the amount of rigor which goes into the data world when you are trying to put together systems and devices. And the CFA program, obviously, many of you are already involved in it, kind of helps you build that knowledge. And one thing I learned was you will never be able to learn enough, and learning becomes a journey for you. And I've tried to keep that as a part of my yearly activity to make sure that I learn, I teach. I also try and see if I can invent new things. I can understand the inventions which are happening in the industry. And I think if you are interested in kind of building that kind of mindset, data is the place to be, because the data science revolution has provided so many opportunities. And I hope in this 30 to 40 minute session or so, I may not be able to give you all the key aspects of all the algorithms which are out there, but I want you to be excited about the things which are happening in the world. And many of you are interested in learning new things, learning languages, but you also got to be strategic, because the opportunities are so many, and it's easy to get lost in the cloud of possibilities. Ultimately, it depends on how you're going to apply it, how you can quantify the benefits of it, you being able to intelligently understand the pros and cons of adopting a particular methodology, and you gaining the business benefits out of it, instead of just kind of following a cookie cutter approach. And the history has told it, right? So in the last 100 plus years or so, we have seen so many inventions, and many times these inventions have tectonically shifted the way we have seen the world as we have seen it today, right? 100 plus years or so, when we had animals and humans trying to build things, we realized that we could leverage water power and steam power, and we could do things which was thought to be impossible. And then we thought about engineering these processes. As we thought about building things, and we found that it's going to be super expensive if we are going to be building all these cool innovations, but we wanted to make it accessible. We realized that we had to provide it to the masses, and companies like Ford thought about automation. And the world became something wherein everybody could access these technologies. And then the third industrial revolution started thinking about, well, how can we start bringing in intelligence? How can we kind of connect the dots and automate various things, leverage computers to understand the numbers, understand the data? And the fourth revolution, we are seeing a lot of connected devices, artificial intelligence and machine learning, more or less imbibed in all our lives, right? So we use Siri and Alexa on a daily basis. We use Google Maps as we drive on our streets. We leverage weather information, and we get forecasts about what's the weather going to look like in the near future. And all these are inventions which have been possible because of data. And the financial services world is no different. In fact, when we see the technological revolutions in the past 50 or 100 years or so, we are in the cusp of a revolution wherein in the near future, we're going to see so many new cool innovations, which is going to change our life significantly. And that's one of the reasons why companies are starting to significantly invest in machine learning and artificial intelligence. So let me just kind of, share a little bit of details on this particular graph. It's a little dated. It's probably 3 to 4 years old. Now, here on the left, what you see is how the patents and the scientific publications in artificial intelligence has grown. Now, what you can see on the left is, between 1950, 1960, and 1999, 2000. So this was the time frame where I was finishing up my grad study. And I was thinking about like leveraging artificial intelligence agents and things like that. But as you can see, there were a lot of flat lines in the context of innovations. There were a lot of scientific publications, but we hadn't seen a huge revolution. But in the last 20 years or so, things have significantly picked up. A huge number of scientific publications. But for me, the most the interesting part as an industry professional is that the patent filings have also significantly picked up. And what that means is companies are not only finding these innovations interesting, but they are seeing business value, and they are building various innovations, and they're patenting all these technologies. And if you just drill down a bit, you can see things like neural networks, support vector machines, rule-based learning, deep learning, all have similar trends. You have seen a significant interest in scientific publications and also the number of patent filings. Now, what does this mean? It basically means that companies are realizing that data and machine learning and artificial intelligence are actually key pieces of the puzzle when you try to make a difference, when you try to innovate. And that's why large companies are hiring significantly in these areas. So if you go to the job boards of many of the large players, if you will see a lot of interest in professionals who have machine learning, data science, artificial intelligence experience. And to just give you a little bit of examples on like why this is extremely important for you to kind of track this phenomenon, I want to kind of share an example which happened a couple of years ago. This is a real example. Now, Elon Musk, most of you follow Elon Musk either on Twitter or through media. He's always in the news, obviously, with SpaceX, with Tesla, with all the things which he posts on Twitter. Now, a couple of years back in 2018, when Tesla was being considered to be taken private, so he posted a tweet wherein he said, "I'm considering taking Tesla private at $420, funding secure." Now, this was posted at 9:48 a.m. in California sometime, because this is California time. And then a couple of hours later, actually a couple of days later, this post was put on LinkedIn, wherein At 12:48, which is exactly more or less the time, this is the New York time, this particular tweet was already on Bloomberg's event-driven feeds. And if you look at the graph, the price impact had already happened in a very short duration. And what that means is within half a second of someone tweeting, you actually have the information available to the entire financial markets, and pricing decisions have already happened and the trading has already happened. It's impossible for humans to sit and digest this information and take these decisions without the support of data and computers. And what that means is if you do not have that kind of technology incorporated into your practice, you are going to be left behind. And you will have to make sure that you are not only kind of building the mechanisms which supports your key investment thesis, but also have the connections to the market, being able to like digest all the information which are coming out there and basically being able to process all this information. And what that means is there has been a paradigm shift on what do you need to learn and where is the world moving towards. Now, when I started my journey as a quant, most of the programs were primarily focused on many of these methodologies. And many of these concepts, you must be familiar as a part of your CFA learning materials or through your practice or through other programs you have done. And most of this was focused on mathematical finance and statistics. And the whole notion was, there is a phenomenon which has happened in the past. Can we infer how this phenomenon has happened? And can we build a statistical model to understand what has happened in the past? And then think about using this knowledge to potentially forecast the future and then see if we can make decisions based on it. Now, guess what has happened? Because of the availability of data, because of the availability of a lot of alternative information and machine learning and various processes, you are able to infer the various relationships between various elements in the data in a much more sophisticated way. And today, a lot of practitioners are focusing on many of these techniques like machine learning, natural language processing, deep learning, leveraging computer vision, graph analytics, et cetera, leveraging alternative data sets, using sentiment analysis and chatbots, et cetera, et cetera. So the notion of you being able to leverage data to build out your models has significantly picked up. And I wouldn't consider this as an alternative. It's basically a confluence of the traditional rigorous mathematical finance concepts, but the ability to use various technological aspects in the context of either simulation or machine learning or statistics, and combining those approaches to build better models. Now, in order to understand why these are important aspects, you got to just step back and think about like what has actually happened in the world. Now, there are three things which are basically driving what I call as the virtuous circle of machine learning and artificial intelligence. So the first thing is the data. As all of you know, we have seen significant amounts of data, and many of these graphs are something which you are already probably familiar with. And we have four elements. One is the volume of the data. We are collecting lots and lots of data, which we did not have in the past. And then the variety of data. So if you're driving around with your cell phone, you probably are leveraging map data from Google, you're listening to music, but you're also generating a lot of data. You're telling Google and other providers where you are and at what speed are you driving, which particular application are you using when you're driving, et cetera, so which means there's a lot of variety of data which is available. In addition to that, you have new channels like social media, like Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, wherein people are using it not only as a communication mechanism, but also as a means of publishing information. So you have to keep track of what's actually happening, similar to the example I was giving you with respect to Tesla. And then the velocity of information, because the speed at which you're getting this information is so huge that you will have to have these mechanisms to ensure that you're able to process all this information. And then finally, the veracity. How many times have we thought that, oh, something has happened, but then realizing that, no, that was just a false bit of information. So you got to have the mechanism to make sure that you're only trusting the right kinds of data sets and also building in mechanisms to understand what's actually happening and have the risk mechanisms to address potential challenges when you're building out these various processes. So with all that said, I want to kind of just briefly touch upon some of these concepts. And in the context of algorithms, you're seeing a lot of different algorithms which are out there. And many of these algorithms have evolved in the open source world. And the reason why Python is a very interesting language compared to that of various professional traditional languages which are offered by enterprises, there's a huge community of developers who have put in time and effort to build out the ecosystem for Python. Universities, researchers, companies have completely transformed the way you think about innovation, and Python has significantly benefited from that whole effort, and you have a lot of packages. If you want to do certain things, just Google Python and a particular package, and you may find some package which actually does what you're thinking about. So which means that today, if you want to build an application, your starting costs are very minimal. You will be able to leverage language like Python, leverage algorithms which are in the public realm, and start building your application with very minimal effort. And in addition to that, you're seeing a lot of large companies realizing that in order to kind of support the ecosystem, to be able to connect the various pieces, it's important to innovate and make those frameworks available in public. And that's why you see a lot of natural language processing libraries and deep learning and neural networks-based libraries provided by various companies. For example, Google is a big supporter of a package called as TensorFlow. There's a Python package called TensorFlow for building out neural networks. And Meta or Facebook is a big supporter of a package called as PyTorch. And that was recently made available to the Linux Foundation, and the whole Linux Foundation, which has popularized Linux, is basically going to be helping out evolve the ecosystem in PyTorch. So which basically means that there's a confluence of all the technologies and the universities and the industries kind of coming together to evolve this open source revolution, if you will. And that's why we are able to access all these smarter algorithms without having to invest a lot to get started. And then finally, the hardware. I remember the day when my system had basic limitations. I had a server, I had X amount of RAM, X amount of memory, and I could run simulations. In fact, I worked with a client who basically said that they could only run 10,000 simulations just because their hardware or the system they were running it on had that limit, and they could not get the results out by 9 o'clock in the morning. So they had to restrict the number of simulations to 10,000. And today with the cloud, you have so many possibilities. You can use GPUs to scale up your computations. You can use cloud to basically leverage resources on the cloud and scale up your calculations. And which means that you have the ability to not only have the technologies at your fingertips, but being able to scale them up and run and test it without having to spend a significant amount of time building out the infrastructure on your own. And guess what? Today, you're not going to see large companies having huge server rooms with a lot of hardware supporting these calculations. Most likely, they would have put in all these calculations in the cloud, and they would be running these calculations. Now, in order to kind of understand some of these things, you are seeing banks and financial companies making these applications readily available. You probably use some of these. For example, if you use Bank of America, you could use the chatbot, if you will, to interact with it. Most likely, many of the services you're probably using, you will be interfacing with the chatbot first, which enhances their ability to service you. If there was a question which has already been answered many, many times, you probably will get the answer much sooner than waiting for a human to speak to for like 45 minutes or so. But then, in order to kind of appreciate many of these algorithms, you got to kind of think a little bit about the data science workflow. Now, in the context of data science workflow, you probably have seen pictures like these many, many times. And the reason why I want to kind of emphasize that there is a workflow which needs to be thought about is because many times as quants or financial analysts, you may be thinking about, well, I'm going to be doing soup to nuts on my own. Well, that may be or may not be the case, depending on the size and the complexity of the application. But to understand what goes behind the scenes to build out these applications, it becomes a revelation of sorts, because you will be understanding where you can add value and where other people in your company or other people you may think about hiring could potentially add value. For example, when you think about data, you have a lot of steps which could be used to cleanse the data, to understand the various features, to transform the various features. And as the science becomes more and more formal, you are seeing newer roles evolve, like data engineers and DevOps engineers who are building out these kinds of ecosystems. On the modeling side, there are so many possibilities. As the science evolves, you're seeing a lot of different kinds of machine learning algorithms out there. So many a times you have a choice. Do I build my algorithms? Do I use a service which someone is providing? Do I use an API which someone is potentially providing? And you can potentially think about integrating some of these services into your workflow if you feel like building out the models from scratch is not your cup of tea. And then finally, you'll have to think about some of the mechanisms to understand whether your models are actually working, whether your data sets are actually clean enough so that you can actually trust your models and the outcomes of this model. And then how do you make this information available to analysts and decision makers so that they could actually use the outcomes of this analysis? Which means that, it's not just about coding or writing a simple workflow. You have to think about it holistically about how am I building a system? What are the various elements which are required to build out a whole system? And where is my place? Where can I add value? What are my possibilities for collaboration? How do I collaborate with other people in my team, other people in other teams which are working with us, so that you can build out this ecosystem, so that you can build out applications which can support the various things you're potentially doing. So I will stop here for a second. And Richard, do you want to share some things about the program? I know there are a couple of programs, questions also coming online.
Yeah, so let's address a couple of questions. So one of them actually, I guess, if we think about that previous slide, I think we can address both questions in a way at the same time. So where's kind of the pure quant type function sit? And Alfonso has a question about what's the best way to become a pure quant. He's asking you, do you do a master's in finance? Do you do a master's in analytics and big data, or something else, right? So where are pure quants in this, and how do you get to be a pure quant? That's one question. I mean, another question that links to this is where the sort of the roles that CFA charter holders might play in this flow.
Absolutely. So let's start with the quant side. When I started Quant University, interestingly, the whole goal was to basically think about what are the needs of quants, right? So, and that has evolved significantly over time. In the beginning, it was mostly like statistical modeling, stochastic modeling, understanding distributions, thinking about the relationship between various products. Today, as I mentioned in my earlier slide, a quant is not just someone who has been really professional in mathematical finance or financial engineering, because you have various data sets which are available, which enables you to kind of understand the relationship between various things. History has happened only once, right? So we assume that we are going to be able to generalize what has happened in the past and try to build forecasts for the future. But history has happened only once, and we have to think about what else is going to happen. Are we going to see a pandemic? Are we going to see inflationary pressure post-pandemic? Is there going to be a geopolitical situation or a war? What happens if all these are daisy chained and happens at the same time? Which is what's happening now, right? So there is no program in the world, if you will, which will basically let you model all these possibilities. So what's your strategy going to be? First of all, you had to think about getting the work experience. And the best way to do it is getting into a role which will set the context for you, right? Then thinking about what are my skills which I've trained myself, and how can I bring in those skills in the most optimal way? So many times it could be that, as when I started the CFA program, I had a gap that, I was really strong in engineering, I was strong in data science, but I was not strong in the concepts, in understanding the relationships, in understanding the fundamental analysis, in understanding the various pieces which come together, the macroeconomic features, the microeconomics, the accounting related aspects, the protocols specific to various countries, the analysis, putting the end stakeholder in mind. All these aspects came through the CFA program, right? So all these are fundamental aspects you kind of, put together and say, okay, now I understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing that. And then finally, it's the ability to assimilate all this information and putting together models. And many a times the programs like the masters or the PhD programs will train you to kind of, build upon certain things. But if you do not have the context, you are going to be really good at the statistical aspects of it, but you may not be able to apply it. So I kind of start the opposite direction, rather than starting with a program and thinking about building your education skills and saying, here you go, I'm ready. Start as a practitioner thinking about what excites me the most. It could be Bitcoin, it could be crypto, it could be building out a new financial ETF product, it could be risk management. Pick your field, get an internship, get a role, understand the ecosystem, make sure that that's something you want to work on, and then think about expanding your knowledge base on what should I be learning in order to support that particular role, and what's the most optimal way to do it. I think you're on mute, Richard. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so very helpful. Just a quick kind of housekeeping point, everyone. We will be sending out the slides and recording the end of this, so you don't have to ask for it specifically. We will send it to you automatically. And then actually we have a couple of related questions, which I think are really interesting. We can't deal with them now or at the end, I don't mind, but essentially they're around the limitations of kind of data analytics, and if you like, things like machine learning, or where's it kind of go wrong, and how can it fail? Now, maybe you don't want to address that now, perhaps you want to address that later. Up to you, Sri. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you rely on data, we are probably thinking about building models which has only seen the past, right? And most of my current work has been focused on what's called as artificial intelligence risk management, which is to understand the deployment of these models, what aspects of explainability, what aspects of fairness, what aspects of adversarial attacks, potentially security risks, because you're delegating risk, the decision making to the models. All those need to be thought about. It's like building a car, right? So in the past, when you thought about building a car, the whole goal was, well, can I drive faster than a horse? And the whole engineering effort was to build out something which was faster than a horse. But then when we realized that we were going to have like hundreds of thousands of cars on the street, then we had to think about rules for the cars. Then we had to think about brakes. We had to think about various ways in which the cars are going to be safer, not only for people who are outside, but also people who are inside. So I think the field is going to evolve very similarly in terms of machine learning and data science, wherein initially it's going to be the Wild West, if you will, wherein we are going to think about building the best, fastest algorithms out there. But then you got to play in a system wherein it has to think, we had to think about fiduciary responsibilities. We had to think about sustainability. We had to think about, governance and risk management, and build all those aspects as we kind of, build out the profession. So I think some of these aspects are still evolving, and I'm constantly involved in those discussions in the financial and other realms. But the point is, just the modelers and the quants will not be able to just build the models and say, okay, here you go, I have a model and let's kind of run it in the wild. You will have to build out the mechanisms. And I think that's one of the reasons why you got to formally engage, roll up your sleeves and work with it so that if I put in garbage in, I'm going to get garbage out. And I can't just trust the model. And you being able to understand, and I think Gaurav was mentioning about visualization, many a times a picture is 1,000 words. When you look at a picture and say, you know what, can I trust looking at this graph, whether the trend is what I'm seeing? Do I have enough data? And many a times you being able to kind of combine your experience and the knowledge from the data sets will help you kind of make better decisions.
Perfect. Thank you. That's a great point, I think, to move on.
Awesome. So, I think you've also already answered some of the questions, Richard.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So I was kind of seeing that the questions disappear. So I was kind of wondering what automated, artificial intelligence system is doing the whole run. So
it wasn't artificial, no.
It wasn't artificial. It was real then. Cool. So do you want me to go through the program details? And
sure. Let's talk about that. Exactly.
Okay, so just want to spend a little bit of time on what does it entail? Can you kind of go through this program? And what we have done is we have put together a 4-module program, and that's going to start on October 5th. And this is kind of it's consolidation of various years of my teaching. In fact, I was kind of counting. I've taught more than 40 graduate semesters, which is in the United States, close to like 5 master's degrees, if you will. So I kind of taught a lot of students learn various ways in which you can build out the programs from scratch. And many times it's hard to kind of build everything. So what we have done is we have consolidated the key aspects, starting from the basics on Python. So we're not going to focus primarily on coding syntax, where you're going to say, okay, this is, and we'll learn coding syntax, but the goal is not to just become a coding expert. It's contextualizing it with real applications and data science methodology. So a couple of things in here. So we are going to think about each week or each module, we are going to have a particular topic of discussion. And then we will have examples, we will have in-class case studies we will discuss, and we will also have the Q sandbox, which enables you to pragmatize and to try out these concepts. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples when I do the demo in a bit. But the point here being, in fact, I may just bring that in so that you can just get a feel for it. Let me see if I can just move the screens around in the interest of time. Just a second, if I can minimize this a bit and move this around. So this is basically, the Q Academy wherein you're going to be using. So you will have the slides, you'll have the various concepts, but in addition to that, you will also have applications, and we have built out applications which leverage real data so that you can try out various concepts. So this one is a credit risk application which leverages a couple of different algorithms, all built in Python, and you'll be able to appreciate what does it take to build out an application like this. But in addition to that, you will understand the code. So we use a lot of Jupyter notebooks, and we will give you Python code and the packages and help you understand the connections between what the various components are, and then kind of apply that to various settings. So you'll work with a lot of case studies to be able to connect the dots. In addition to that, you will have a lot of hands-on examples you can try on your own. And the goal is for you to be able to, as Gaurav was mentioning before, take out what you have learned in the class and apply it to your job as soon as possible. And you will have a certificate from the CFA Institute. In addition to that, we have various concepts. I'm not going to bore you with the details. Richard is going to share the slides and the various module-related information with you. But primarily what we have done is we are basically focused on 4 aspects. One is the core aspects of Python and what do you need to know when you're building out various applications in Python. The second aspect is once you bring in the data into Python, how can you understand the characteristics of the data, which is through either analysis, summarization, or through visualization. So you will have some examples so that you can connect the dots and understand how to understand the various concepts there. And the third component is primarily focused on machine learning, which is to introduce you to the various concepts in machine learning, supervised, unsupervised machine learning with real examples so that you can try out some real financial data sets and look at what's feasible and how can you infer various bits of information from the data. And then finally, a bunch of different case studies, including one on natural language processing, one on portfolio optimization with Python, and also talking a little bit about where the field is going and how to kind of apply the dots. So it's primarily geared towards the working professional or someone who is going to be interested in applying these skills in a financial setting for a role wherein you'll be able to like connect it with various aspects in the financial services world. So a little bit about, so this is again some of the comments from various participants. From what I've heard from various students, and this is the third cohort we're going to be doing in October. The first two cohorts, we heard a lot of feedback, and we have tried to incorporate all this feedback into the program. But the point is that a lot of people were able to like basically come with the perspective of, I know my financial concepts, I know my various ability to kind of connect the dots in the context of financial instruments and investments, but how do we bring that into practice using data science? And that's where the delta was, and I think this program helped kind of bridge that gap. It's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern time, which I think is going to be convenient for people in Europe too, because it's going to be in the evening, and also people in the West Coast because it's going to be in the morning. So we tried to like find a time which helps with a couple of different time zones. And that's a little bit about the program. So if there are any questions, I can take them now, Richard, or we can just get started.
Just address a couple actually. So, well, actually one question I think is quite a quick one. Stephen is asking, do you have ties to MIT? Because he's doing a data science program there coming up. I think the answer is no, but your university is Northeastern, right? That's where you're
yeah, I mean, it's not a real, I mean, I'm based out of Boston, so anybody in Boston will have some kind of connection to MIT, but it depends on what does ties mean. But I primarily teach at Northeastern University. I do have contacts at MIT, which I usually, discuss and interact with. But it also depends on, what, and Stephen, I think maybe it's an offline discussion, with your particular situation. Yeah.
Fair enough. But so another question that came into me directly was, so someone who's in their mid-40s, never done any kind of issue like data science related things or even quantitative related things before, and is an investor by role, portfolio manager. Frankly, they are worried about getting into this. They're also worried about being left behind. So what's your advice, something like that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Someone in the mid-40s myself, I can completely understand, what the thing is, because I kind of deal with it on a daily basis. Because do I learn? But the other way I think about it is, what don't I know? I need to know what I don't know, because ultimately you are not going to be able to do everything on your own. And if you are an investor, you had to think about like, how can I make 1 + 1 = 10 rather than 1 + 1 = 2, right? So that's kind of the major goal of an investor, right? So we always think about leverage. So my way of thinking about this is, and we did have a lot of participants who are in your similar demographic as they went through the program. For them, primarily the goal was to understand aspects wherein they could make their workflows more efficient, either in the context of visualization or being able to connect to various services, rather than just trusting someone who's a vendor saying, oh, I have an API to do XYZ. How can I basically understand and probe a little more to understand what's actually happening? Secondly, it's a fascinating way to kind of just understand where your skill gaps are and making sure that you leverage the right kinds of people as your next hires. The reason why I put up the slide earlier, wherein JP Morgan and BlackRock and others are primarily enhancing their data science and machine learning groups, is exactly the reason why there's demand in the market, because the companies are realizing that they don't have those kinds of skills, and they're bringing in folks who have those kinds of skills. So you can look at it two ways. You're picking up new skills, but you'll also understand, do you really like it? Is that something you want to do on your own? Rather than, or you can just basically, partner with someone, maybe a junior developer or someone you're going to be hiring new, to make sure that you are that idea generator and someone can actually implement those ideas. And you being able to tag team with someone and building upon those skills will actually be much more beneficial rather than you kind of doing everything on your own. But it doesn't mean that you can't learn. We have had people who are kind of started things from scratch. In fact, I have a call with someone next week who's so much into optimization, and they have specific ideas about specific papers they want to build upon. And they are looking at some Python packages, and they're saying, well, I really need to understand how these actually work, because I'm realizing that the structure of my problem needs to use this particular algorithm, wherein, guess what? Many authors are now putting out their reproducible code in Python. So they want to leverage those pieces of code and integrate it into their workflow. So you will have that edge to be able to bring in those connections with the public research which is out there. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, excellent. Thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, we can move on to the case study.
Absolutely. So I just want to set up this is one of the case studies we discussed. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details and syntax, but I just want to give you an idea of some of the things which we are seeing. If you talk to anybody in the financial services world, they will all tell you that you have a lot of data in structured Excel-like files. But today, we have a lot of people who are now leveraging text-based data. And one of the pieces of information which you can find easily is earning call transcripts. And as you may know, there are been protocols in which you have to publish these earning calls transcripts to regulators' websites. And what we did was we basically built a case study so we can take one of these earning call transcripts and try to understand them using machine learning and data science. And one of the things you can realize is, it's not like watching a movie, right? So wherein the dialogues and the pictures and the audio effects all come together, so you completely understand the emotions. Financial data sets, it's very context specific, it's very domain specific. So there are a lot of data related challenges, and a lot of natural language processing methodologies are geared towards trying to infer what the intent of the communication is and trying to summarize those. So you see a lot of different kinds of innovations happening in the world, either topic summarization or sentiment analysis, keyword extraction, tone analysis, translation, comparison, information extraction. There are a lot of different applications happening in the natural language service processing world. And a lot of companies are now delving into these and building applications, leveraging various libraries and data sets which are out there. And the goal is to be able to try and leverage some of the technological advances we have seen in applications like Alexa or Siri or whatever it is, but try and see if you can apply that into a financial services setting. So we built out a pipeline, and this is actually, people who are taking this course, they'll go through the whole process. So you'll build out a pipeline to be able to ingest data from Edgar, leverage various APIs. So here, rather than we building a natural language processing application from scratch, what we're going to do is we're going to leverage APIs. And guess what? There are a lot of applications which you don't have to build from scratch, but you need to know how to integrate it. And I'm just going to show you an example in here. So this one, you have companies like Amazon, which has an API called as an Amazon Comprehend API, wherein you send them a statement or a summary, they'll get back information saying that, well, this is the sentiment score, it was positive or negative, etc. Microsoft Azure has a similar API. Google has a similar API. So it basically means that many a times when you're building data science applications, you don't have to build everything from scratch. You will be able to leverage other APIs which are available outside so that you can make your workflow more efficient. You're not going to go into a bank and think about building the most optimal algorithm. You're going to be thinking about how can I generate a workflow or a process which is going to enhance my research workflow or help me make better decisions, create new products, either in a fintech setting or in your traditional setting. So the goal is to be able to leverage the various pieces of information out there. And guess what? Many of these APIs will require you to be able to learn Python so that you can interface with those APIs and call those APIs. APIs are basically ways in which you can send a bit of information, just text, and get back summaries or get back sentiments, etc. Right? So in order to do that, you may have to kind of build our Python and use Python. So what we did was we built out a case study and we ran these algorithms, got back the results, and then we analyzed the results, leverage some visualization techniques so that you can plot these graphs out so that you can understand the intent. And one of the things which kind of relates to one of the questions was, you will have to do the due diligence afterwards, because when we called out 3 different APIs, each one of these APIs gave different results. Now, the question becomes, for your particular context, which API is the best API of choice? And how can you potentially leverage those? So, and we, go through an example to understand that. So the point I wanted to emphasize is, if you start thinking about building applications with a specific goal in mind, you will be dealing with a lot of choices. And you will have to think about, do I build or do I source it through an API? Do I kind of start doing everything from scratch, or can I leverage an open source package, which already does a lot of things for me, and then I can integrate it and then build out my workflow? So there are a lot of possibilities, and that's kind of the whole goal. Help you expand your horizon of possibilities. This 4-week program is not going to make you an excellent coder. You won't be able to build out new Python packages, but it'll open up the world for you. It'll open up to the possibilities of what's possible with Python. And as an investment professional, how can you leverage all those concepts and build upon the skill sets which you really wanted to learn, but you were always hesitating. And now in these 4 weeks, you will be able to deal with it contextually and in a concrete way through examples and case studies, so that at the end of this program, you will have the confidence to build out various programs from scratch and apply it to the various settings you're going to be working on. So this is where you can get more information and register. I think we are almost out of time, Richard. So I'll pause here, and if there are any additional questions, I can take them now.
That's perfect. I think you've addressed all our questions. It's really, really helpful. Just one comment I'd make to participants. I know many people are thinking, well, this is it's a significant amount of money I need to invest in this. I think there's a couple of comments about that. So one is, if you are working, then do have a conversation with your boss. Not investing in data science is frankly not realistic for a modern investment firm. So it is a critical skill set for all staff to have and for all teams to develop. So talk to your boss. And if maybe you're a student and funding is a bit more of an issue, then think about other ways that you can build up your data science knowledge using free resources before perhaps you delve into something like this. There's lots of them available. This doesn't have to be the starting off point of your journey, but this is a fantastic way to kind of really cap and your knowledge, and also we'll learn in a very efficient way. So just wanted to make that point. There's other ways of learning, and CF Institute also has a wide range of other learning courses available. But this is, if you like, it's kind of our pinnacle of learning courses on data science, because this is the one where you get to interact the most with an expert like Sri Krishnamurthy. So final point then is, right, no matter what you choose to do, data science is not something that any of us can ignore if we're really keen on staying in this investment industry. So one way or another, you have to address it. So thanks so much, Sri. Really appreciate your time. And thanks everyone for taking the time to listen today.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.